Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Pearl Hoagland, and I'm the Program Manager for the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, and I will be your facilitator today. A quick shout out to our affiliate partners across the country who provide training and education to fundraisers. Check out the map to find an institute in your community. And this is our mission statement, which demonstrates our commitment to building up the fundraising sector through education and training. Now, before we get started, let's take a sip selfie. You're going to see the presenters pop up on your screen soon. Take a selfie with us and tag us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn using the hashtags SIPselfie and SIPwebinar, and then we'll reshare your posts. Hi.
Hello, hello everybody. I can really get it. So give you all maybe 20 seconds to snap our photo, snap a selfie with us. Get your phones, everyone. Take a selfie with the presenters. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. And if you do tag us, we will reshare your posts and get you some visibility on our social media pages. All right. Don't forget to download our handout, which is available to you during the webinar. It can be found on the webinar control panel. And now I'd like to introduce you to our main presenter, Jess Green. Jess has been working in the nonprofit sector for over 10 years, helping small and medium-sized nonprofits achieve their missions through strategic fundraising and marketing. In 2014, she received her MA in Nonprofit Leadership and Management from the University of San Diego. Jess has since relocated back to Virginia, where she continues to pursue her personal mission to help nonprofits and passionate people work smarter, not harder, to change the world. Jess is also the founder of Minimalist Fundraising, a resource for fundraisers and world changers to declutter their fundraising and focus their efforts to raise more money for their mission. She is currently proud to bring her love of the outdoors together with her love of fundraising as the Director of Philanthropy at the Shenandoah National Park Trust, the official nonprofit partner of Virginia's Backyard National Park. Welcome, Jess.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. This is something I really am passionate about. I love the nonprofit sector. I love being a fundraiser, and I hope that you all do too. So we wanted to start off by getting to know who is on with us a little bit better and where you all are in your career journey. So how long have you been in fundraising? So we're going to have options for a year or less, 2 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, or more than 10 years.
Now, a poll is going to launch on your screen. If you choose to select other, please write your response in the chat box so we can know more about you. We're going to give you 30 more seconds to get your answers in, and then we're going to take a look at the results.
So I'm excited to see the results for this poll. and see kind of what the variety is that we have on here, because I think what we're going to talk about today is really applicable regardless of what point in your career you are in. All right, great. So it looks like we've got a good variety. So we have about 19% who have been in fundraising a year or less, about 30% 2 to 5 years, 22% 5 to 10 years, and about 24% who are over 10 years. And then we've got a few that responded other.
And so for our other responses, it looks like someone has been in fundraising for 25 years.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I fall into the 10 plus years category, which seems like a long time. It doesn't seem like I've been doing it this long, but if I think back, it actually was 10 years. And it's always interesting, I think, to think about the nonprofit career path, so where we all started. And if you think back to elementary school when you had career day and you were asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would imagine a lot of people in your class dressed up as lawyers or doctors or baseball players or ballerinas, all the things that kids want to be when they grow up. I am pretty sure that no one in your elementary school class said, I want to be a fundraiser when I grow up. That's not usually how most of us get to this place, either to the nonprofit sector, but certainly not to fundraising. And I know that was the case for me. I started my first nonprofit job as an administrative assistant in an organization that only had 3 staff. So when it came to fundraising, it was all hands on deck and a little bit trial by fire. And I just sort of learned along the way that this was something that I was good at. So fundraising has always been a part of my career, even if I wasn't technically a fundraiser, if that wasn't part of my title. But what's interesting about the nonprofit career path is that it's typically non-linear. So it's not necessarily a straight path from where you are now to where you want to go. You may decide that you want your career to stay in fundraising, but maybe you want to try different things. If you're a major gifts officer, maybe you want to try corporate philanthropy. Maybe your career path is taking you on the route to be an executive director or maybe a fundraising consultant. So the career path can sort of move and be fluid depending on where you want to go. And so what we're going to talk about today is that while you're on that career path, how can you make sure that you are being fulfilled in your career? So just a quick state of the sector, some facts that we thought might be interesting for you in thinking about both fundraising and the nonprofit sector. So something a lot of people don't think about is that in 2013, over 10% of the entire US workforce worked for a nonprofit. That's a big darn deal. We are a big sector. We are making a huge difference on the economy and in our communities. And I think that we are seeing a growing trend of people recognizing that, which is great. Another interesting survey that the Urban Institute did last year said that 50% of nonprofits were planning to increase the size of their staff in 2017. So that's exciting for 2 reasons. More job opportunities. So if you're looking to change jobs, nonprofits are planning to hire. That's great. If you're not planning to change jobs, hopefully that means that maybe they're going to hire more staff at your organization. I know I could use a few more hands on deck, which would be great. But another interesting thing that came out of this Urban Institute survey is that 81% of the nonprofits who responded have no formal retention policy. And what that means is they have no plan on how to keep you there. And so that's just important to know, and important when you're thinking about how you can be fulfilled in your career, that sometimes you need to rely on you and things that you're doing to move your career forward, because sometimes your organizations just aren't there yet. They may not be thinking in that way yet. And one of the challenges that presents is that nonprofits have a high rate of staff turnover. You may know this from your organization, but we're inching up on a 20% turnover rate. each year at nonprofits, which is a lot. So that's new people coming in, people leaving, and that presents a lot of challenges. And for the past decade or so, the average time that a fundraiser stays in a job at a nonprofit is only 18 to 30 months. And that's pretty terrible because we all know that time is one of the things that is vital to fundraising. And if turnover is continuing to go at that speed, it really can cause some challenges in not only your organization's fundraising, but for you personally in your career. So why is this a problem? Really, turnover is a problem in the for-profit world, it's a problem in the nonprofit world. It doesn't matter which department you're in. And one of the main reasons that it's a problem is because learning takes time. So when someone leaves, institutional knowledge leaves with them. The new person comes in, it takes time to learn the job, to learn the organization, to learn the culture, to learn the programs. All of that takes time. For fundraisers, there's some additional challenges in that strategy takes time. So if you've ever started a new job and you come in and they're 3 years into a 5-year strategic plan, and now you're sort of stuck with it, right? And maybe you don't agree with it, or maybe you would have gone a different route, or it doesn't vibe with your fundraising, that can cause challenges for you. For the organization, it certainly can cause them to lose momentum when it comes to their strategy, if turnover is happening in the middle of that strategy. But the biggest thing for fundraisers, and the biggest reason that turnover, that 18 to 30 months turnover is a problem, is because you know that relationships are the bedrock of fundraising. It's the most important thing, the relationships that you build with your donors, and that takes time. And so if turnover is happening at your organization, not only is the organization losing out because they're losing those relationships that you had with the donor, it's also tough on us fundraisers to constantly, every 18 to 30 months, have to learn a whole new donor base and build totally new relationships with people. It just can be a little taxing. So what can you do? So we're going to talk about 3 ways that you can sort of take the lead of your career and maybe help the sector to combat this high turnover problem. So the first thing, and I don't want to see or hear about any eye rolling when I say this, you got to build your network. So why is it important to have a network? We talk about networking a lot in the nonprofit sector. We all know it's important. It's probably not your favorite thing. And when you talk about networking, you might be envisioning some horrible cocktail party where you're standing there awkwardly, not knowing how to talk to someone or not knowing anyone in the room. That's not necessarily the network I'm talking about. So really just building your network, there's a lot of benefits to having a strong network. And a couple of those are, of course, it's your support system. Having like-minded people who are facing similar challenges that you can talk to about what's going on in your career, whether you're sort of at a crossroads and need to make a decision, or if there are challenges in your organization that you're dealing with, you can have a network of people who have been through that, can give you advice. You can also have mentors. So when we talked about that nonlinear career path, whichever route you decide to take, it's great to have a network that has people who have done that already, have done what you want to do, because they can give you advice. They can tell you what's worked for them and what didn't. It's also a great way to learn. And I think specifically, especially if you end up moving communities, it's a great way to learn about what works and what doesn't work in your community. I can tell you from personal experience, moving from San Diego, which is a large city, to Central Virginia, which is very rural, there are certain fundraising tactics that just don't work well here. And I would not have known about them if I didn't have a strong network. An example is that several of the counties around me right now don't have good cell service and they have spotty internet connections. So online and mobile fundraising can be a challenge here, which was a big part of what I was doing when I was in San Diego, a much bigger city. Certainly your network also is a great way to generate and bounce ideas off each other. And then it's also a way for you to have connections. A strong network can be the key to your future job success. And for a couple of reasons, not only because people can make recommendations about you that can help move your resume from the bottom or middle of the pile to the top, but also I have found that, we are helpers in the nonprofit sector. People want to help you. If you're looking for a new opportunity and you put that out to your network, they'll go to work for you. And you might find out about opportunities that aren't even posted yet. So how can you build your network? So I'm going to go through a few things here, a few suggestions on how to build your network, and there's some additional resources in your handout. But one of the things that I think people often forget about in the nonprofit sector that I highly recommend to build your network is join a nonprofit board. So obviously not the board of the nonprofit that you work for, but another nonprofit that you're really passionate about that's in your community, or even a national nonprofit that you're really want to be involved with. So not only is this a way to gain great leadership experience, it's also a way to continue to ignite your passion. So it might be a completely different mission from the organization that you work with. It might be, so a way for you to explore a different passion. It might be the same passion, just a different type of work. Let's say you work at an environmental organization and environmentalism is really important to you. Maybe there's another environmental organization that you really want to connect to, and joining their board is a great way to do that. It also certainly builds your network because you get to meet the staff of that nonprofit, get to know them, but you also get to meet and network with your fellow board members who are likely business leaders and community leaders that you would want to know and have part of your group. For fundraisers, I also think this is an important step because it lets you walk in your board members' shoes. So your board is vital to your fundraising. And sometimes I think we either set expectations too high or too low, or don't communicate well to our board. There's a lot of challenges I'm sure you had in fundraising with your board. And by joining a board yourself and being a board member and seeing it from their perspective, it might even help you in your current job in working with your board and getting them really excited about fundraising. So another way to build your network is to join a professional association. This is a great way to meet and learn from other nonprofit professionals in your area. So again, there's some more information in your handout, but 3 of the national organizations that we have highlighted excuse me, are YMPN, EPIP, and AFP. So kind of the alphabet soup of professional associations for nonprofits. These are great places to meet others that, especially for the support network, I've had a lot of success with YMPN and AFP, and I would suggest too, excuse me, I would suggest that if you don't have a chapter of one of these organizations in your area, number one, you can certainly start a chapter. There's nothing wrong with that. But number 2, I would say look outside your community a little bit. So broaden where the chapters might be located. So for example, I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, which does not have a chapter of any of these organizations. But just down the road, about an hour in Richmond, they have a YMPN chapter and an AFPA chapter. And so I'm a part of those chapters, and it helps me expand my network geographically. I also happen to fundraise regionally, so it's an excuse for me to go to Richmond and meet with our donors there when I do go to their meetings. Another idea for building your network is attend networking events that are not necessarily related to the nonprofit sector. That really helps you to widen your circle. So whether that's the Chamber of Commerce, American Marketing Association, or even a meetup group, meetup.com. So an affinity group that has something to do with something you're passionate about, or for example, I fundraise for a national park, and there are a ton of great hiking groups on meetup.com. And so I have joined some of them as just a way to broaden my network, but also introduce people to my organization. It's kind of a win-win there. And then one more idea is to join or start a mastermind group. And if you're not familiar with a mastermind group, typically they're a group of people, usually less than 10 people, who get together regularly. And the goal is really not only to talk through challenges or opportunities, but also to be accountability partners. So you really put this group together thoughtfully. So you could be a group of fundraisers in your community that are part of a mastermind group. And you really become the go-to place for you to actually get things done. So they're your accountability partners. They keep you on track with whatever your goals are. But again, they really can provide a great place to talk through challenges and opportunities. So in your handout, there is a great link to an article that talks a little bit more about mastermind groups and how you can start one.
Jess, we have a question for you that relates to this slide. Actually, a few questions have come up all around the same topic. So we talked about joining a board of directors, and when you join a board, since the role is often fundraising, how do you navigate between your actual career as a fundraiser and then a volunteer fundraiser? Is there a conflict of interest, and what do you do when you're in that position?
That is a great question. And it kind of goes back to one of the things that a piece of advice that I give to people, even when you're recruiting new board members to your organization. I think we often, as fundraisers, will get pigeonholed to be on the fundraising committee of the board or be the fundraising chair. Just like when you recruit an accountant to your board, you automatically put them on the finance committee. So I think if that is the case, there certainly can be some conflicts of interest if you're fundraising for another organization. So when you go to join that board, be really clear with them about your role as a fundraiser and that you're happy to help them with strategy, but you can kind of set the tone that, you know, I may not be able to ask for money for these reasons, or you could say, you know, I want to be part of the events committee or the marketing committee, something that's not fundraising, because it also kind of helps you to broaden your skills, get to use them in a different way, but can help you kind of walk away from the fundraising piece of it a little bit. Again, you can offer to say, obviously this is my expertise area, so you could be a great resource for them as far as strategy and things like that, but just let them know from the beginning that asking for money may be a conflict of interest, if especially your organization has a similar mission. Okay, any other questions?
That's it as it relates to that slide. Thank you.
Great. So the next tip in sort of making sure that you are staying fulfilled in your career is keep your knowledge fresh. So there are a ton of learning opportunities out there today. Like I said, because I think the general public is getting more aware of nonprofits. Again, going back to that statistic that we make up 10% of the US workforce, there are a lot more resources for nonprofits than there have been in the past. So a lot of cities now have nonprofit resource centers. Community foundations are really getting into the nonprofit resource game and hosting both certificate programs, different workshops. Sometimes they can give you access to resources that you don't have at your job currently. And then universities are also really getting into the nonprofit learning game. So there are a lot of certificate programs through local universities. There are master's programs. Obviously, I got my master's in nonprofit management and leadership from the University of San Diego. I know here on the East Coast, the University of Richmond also has a program like that. So it's always great to keep your knowledge fresh and find these local opportunities. There are certainly conferences that you can attend, both national and local. There are some more resources in your handout related to that. And what I love about both these learning opportunities as well as attending conferences, sometimes you look at the content and you think, I kind of already know this stuff, especially if you're our participant who has been doing this for 25 years. You think, I really know a lot of this stuff. So the content of these conferences or sessions may not pique your interest at first, but a lot of times the conversation that's had within those rooms, so within the conference sessions, within the community that you build when you go to these workshops, can be almost the most important part. So you get to really hear from other people and the challenges that they're facing, how they're working through them, and also get ideas from them. There's nothing wrong with peeking on someone else's paper and seeing, okay, that's a great campaign idea. How could we kind of mold that to fit our programs? There's also so many resources online. It's actually a little bit of a black hole, so you have to be careful, I think, when you dig around online. But we gave you a couple of resources in the handout, like Network for Good and Classy.org, who literally have a library of nonprofit resources these days. And some of those are webinars or ebooks or blog posts. Online, there is just a ton of resources. I know, for example, when I am getting ready to start writing an appeal, I write appeals all the time. I've written many of them in my life. I know how to write an appeal, but sometimes you just need a little bit of fresh inspiration. And so I will go online anytime and Google 2018 successful fundraising appeal examples. And you'll find some great blogs out there that are curating these things, curating appeal letters from nonprofits around the country that really can help just, again, refresh, inspire you, and get you to think differently about how you're doing your work. Certainly, you can also consider a fundraising certificate. Like I mentioned, a lot of universities these days have certificate programs, or these nonprofit resources will offer them. And then, of course, you can get your CFRE, which is kind of the gold standard for fundraisers. And then, of course, the Stanford Institute has their Fundraising Academy. So one of the things that I think is most important for us as fundraisers and as nonprofit staffers really across the board, preventing burnout. So nonprofit burnout is a real thing. And part of that 18 to 30 month churn that happens in the nonprofit sector is because of burnout. So we are often asked to do a lot. We are often asked to do more than what's just in our job description. For example, my current title is Director of Philanthropy, but my organization does not have a staff member dedicated to marketing and communications. So I also do that, even though it's not part of my job title. That's been sort of the reality for a lot of the organizations that I've worked for, especially smaller nonprofits. So I just wanted to go through a couple of tips to help prevent burnout, because that really can be detrimental to your career and cause you to sort of, at that 18-month mark, run for the hills from an organization that maybe you really like and maybe you really enjoy, but if it's too much, you'll get burnt out. So I'll start with the easiest thing to do to prevent burnout, though I think some of us in the nonprofit sector have a hard time with that. And that's learning to say no. So we have a hard time with this, particularly in the nonprofit sector, because we are so passionate about our mission. But it is really important that you learn to say no to opportunities and things that you don't have the capacity to do. And I'll give you a suggestion that has worked for me as far as how to do this, because I know sometimes, someone will bring a project to you, whether it's a donor or a well-meaning board member who has a great idea that they want to share. And you may think it's a good idea, you may not think it's a good idea. But sometimes it can just be hard to say no in the moment because you so want to just help the people that you work for. So you just say yes to everything. So one way that you can do this is if someone comes to you, maybe it's your boss or again a board member, and says, we really should do this one project. You can say, I think that's a great idea. If you don't think it's a great idea, just say no from the beginning. But let's say you do think it's a good idea. So you want to say yes to it. What you can do is say, I think this is a great idea. Let's do it. But here are all the things I'm working on right now. So for me to be able to put the energy and time into this to make it really great, one of these things have to go. So I have to say no to one of these things that's already on my list to be able to say no to something else. So that's one of the things that I think really contributes to burnout, is that we just try to keep piling and piling and piling things on our plate. And again, we're tend to be a very compassionate profession. We want to help, we want to do more, but at some point we have to learn to say no. Another point I wanted to bring up is that the word priorities is kind of a fake word. So there's a quote on your handout from Greg McKeown, who wrote the book Essentialism, that basically points out the fact that the word priority, singular, has been part of the English language for centuries, right? And it means the one most important thing. The word priorities, plural, was not a word in the English vocabulary until the 1900s. And so it's really kind of a product of the industrial age and sort of our new culture of multitasking. And so when you're thinking about, I have all these priorities, all these things I have to do, whether that's even the priorities for one day or 1 week or for the full year, remember that you really can only put a ton of effort into one thing. That needs to be your main priority. When you try to multitask, especially in one day, if you try to do 3 or 4 different things, what you'll find is that you can never really fully put your focus into one thing because you're hopping. And another resource that's mentioned in your handout is a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. And Cal Newport actually did a lot of scientific research on how our brains work. And so there's actually research that says that this multitasking thing is not really a thing. And it's really hard to do when you have so many priorities and you're not focusing your work. That multitasking can really kill your productivity and make you burn out even faster. So kind of along with that, I have to say, we have a tendency to think that email is work. Email is not work. It feels like work. It feels like accomplishment because there's basically a ticker that shows you all the things that you're going through when the number in your inbox goes down. But it's not really the core of our work. And I know that I tend to get wrapped up in email, and I can spend an hour, 2 hours easily in my inbox responding to messages, and you feel like you've accomplished something, but you haven't really gotten to the bulk of your work. So I just wanted to throw this in there because I think it's part of our culture today and part of how we communicate. But just remember that email is really not work, and it should not be your to-do list. So if you really just focus too much time on it, again, you'll get to burnout much faster. And going back to Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, so you got to make time for reflection and figuring out what your deep work is. So whether that's concentrating on a project without the distractions of email and social media, taking time out of the office, after you complete a big project or a big campaign or an event, taking time to reflect both with your staff, but also yourself, what worked and what didn't work. Do you want to do this type of thing again? Was it really worth your time? Did the outcome really meet your expectations? I think sometimes it's so easy to finish a project and just, drive on to the next one. And we really have to take that time to do the reflection. And it's really what helps us to move forward and make sure that we're being strategic about our work. And then the last thing I think that I want to bring up that I think is very important is what I call meeting with your mission. So basically what that means is be a volunteer at your organization. Go work with your program staff without your fundraising hat on. Just be there to reconnect with your mission. I think so often as fundraisers, we get, again, caught up in just moving forward to the next thing, raising the next dollar, meeting the next donor. And we sometimes forget that, we forget to recharge our passion by coming back to our mission. So I'll give you an example. So I fundraised for Shenandoah National Park. My office is not in Shenandoah National Park. It's actually 30 minutes outside of it. And there have definitely been times where I have looked up and a month has gone by and I haven't seen our park. And so I've tried to make time to get into the park, whether it's with a donor or to take our staff there. I'm actually taking our staff on a development retreat tomorrow because, again, we just need to spend some time in our park to reconnect with our mission. And it may be, let's say, for example, you work at an organization that provides literacy training or literacy resources for elementary school kids. How much fun would it be to spend your Tuesday morning just working with the kids that are part of your organization? They're your constituents. Not only is this really helpful, I think, in recharging your passion and getting you reconnected to your mission so that you can continue to do your work better, it reminds you of why you're doing what you're doing, which in stressful times can be a really helpful thing. It also will help you be a better fundraiser. You will be able to talk more effectively about your work. So imagine that Tuesday morning, you sat there and you tutored a young boy and you helped him improve his reading skills. And then on Wednesday, you go to meet with a donor and you can tell them from your own personal experience what you did the day before and the impact it had on that child. And that's what their investment is going towards. Just think about how much more impactful that is than just sort of, the very well-written appeals that you put together. Having that personal experience will make you a better fundraiser.
Thank you, Jess. And now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, but before I do that, I just want to remind everyone that there is a handout in the handout section of your webinar control panel. So definitely download it. And also you will receive it in a follow-up email when we send our email with the slide deck and recording to you. So don't worry, you'll be able to reference it now and in the future. So now to our guest speaker, Liliane Lendvai. Liliane is the operations manager at Blair Search Partners, a retained executive search and recruiting firm in San Diego with a unique specialization in serving nonprofit and public sector clients. Liliane manages the firm's daily business operations and works directly with clients and candidates to fill positions at the staff, director, and executive levels. Liliane is a 2018 graduate of the San Diego Leadership Alliance, as well as the LEAD San Diego Impact Program. Her community engagement includes YNPN, Women Give San Diego, and EPIP, Emerging Practitioners in Philanthropy. Liliane has an MBA from Cal State San Marcos and was recently honored by LEAD San Diego with the 2018 Herbert G. Klein Memorial Award. Welcome, Liliane, and Jess and Liliane, take it away.
Thank you, Pearl. Thank you, Jess. It's been a pleasure listening to you. Hello there, everyone. Such great information you've been instilling.
Oh, thanks, Liliane. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you.
So what we've been talking about so far is really tips and tools for us as fundraisers to make sure that our career is fulfilling with things that we can do. But another big part of that, obviously, is making sure that we are working in an organization that's the right fit for us, which happens to be your expertise area. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this. So I think we'll start off with, how do we know if an organization is a right fit for us?
Sure. So I think it starts with what you've been discussing, Jess, is making sure that the mission resonates with you. Because if you're not excited going into it every day, you will feel it. Your donors will feel it. The staff will feel it. It's not sustainable. And with nonprofit, having to do so many different tasks at various times and not necessarily having the same sort of compensation or benefits of maybe corporate, you have to be really driven by what you're doing. So that's a huge component of it in and of itself. Also, something that's logical for you in terms of time. So it has to be fulfilling both personally and also professionally too. So taking a look at your career trajectory in terms of where do you want to go? What do you want to build upon in terms of your experience and knowledge? Where are the opportunities that can go from there? Is this a good time for you in terms of bandwidth? So for example, talking about joining a board or joining a committee, very important to do that. But is this the right time to do it for you? How much should you take on? To what degree are you really able to commit when you take all things into consideration? So those are some things that you want to start at looking, is where can it go in terms of your personal fulfillment, and then where is it professionally in terms of your career trajectory?
Yeah, I think that was a great suggestion. We talked about those tips to build your network, and you definitely, I think, hit it on the head. You don't have to do all those things to build your network. Those are just suggestions, and I think that's a great advice for people to be thinking about, what works for them. So what are the red flags maybe that we should look for, or maybe specific questions that we should ask when we are interviewing to make sure that an organization is the right fit for us?
Great question. So the most important part, in my opinion, are the people that you work with in terms of the environment. You have to be excited about the people you're working with because you're spending more time oftentimes with your colleagues than your actual family or friends. So one thing you want to check on in the interview is, first of all, who would be your direct supervisor? Who would be your executive director? Who would you be working with on a day-to-day basis that would really be shaping your career too and your general level of satisfaction? If you're not connecting with that person, you should not be proceeding forward, because this is someone that will have a huge impact on your life in many ways. Then you also, of course, want to take a look at your colleagues too and see what that environment is. And a lot of times we'll get questions, or I'll get questions too. What is the culture of the organization? How does it feel there? And we can do our best to describe it, but it's always far more beneficial to be on site, actually in the building, seeing how it is, to really know what it's like. So that's something that you want to do. If you're not able to go on site beforehand and meet before you sign that job offer, that's a red flag, because you need to know what you're coming into on the actual physical site where you'll be spending your time and who you'll be working with. Also, another thing to do is find out about the position beforehand. So if this is a newly created position, what are the expectations for this position in the future? If this is one that has been there before, what has the tenure looked like for those who have previously held the position? That can give you a better idea if this is one that's geared for growth, or one that might have been multiple jobs consolidated into one, where you'll be having to try to drive forward more than maybe you've initially put yourself into. So finding out about the position and where it's going in relation to the organization is something of benefit.
That's great advice. Great. So kind of thinking same thing in the interview, but on the other side of the table, what are organizations looking for from us?
Sure. So by the time that you've entered an interview with us, for example, because before our clients, so the various nonprofits we work with, even meet with someone, we do the initial screen. So we do resume screening, phone calls, in person. And by the time you've reached that, we have a pretty good idea that you have the competency and the skills there. Of course, we'll follow up with that and try to find out more information. But what we really look for is energy. If that person is, first of all, excited about the position, if they are able to express that enthusiasm, but channel it in a way that will be productive for the organization too. I want to feel uplifted by this person that I'm around. If they're coming in here and are combative, it doesn't happen too often, but sometimes it does. Nervous energy, that's something that's disconcerting. You also want to make sure that they can hold themselves well and be professional and can go to a donor meeting or go to a donor dinner and represent the organization well, because when they're out in the community, whenever you are, even in just going about your personal life too, you are still representing your organization. And so you want to make sure that you're finding someone who really will speak to the values and the mission and what you're doing. So that's something that we look for. So that's the way you can set yourself apart as a candidate. And of course, just basic etiquette really goes a long way. Follow-up emails, thanking for their time, doing your research beforehand, coming prepared with questions, knowing about the organization, just these fairly, you could say, intuitive things that sometimes we forget when we're so busy going about everything. Making sure that you're showing that you are, considerate and have taken the time to do this, because the way you'll approach this interview is how you'll approach the rest of your work too, and interact with your donors and your clients.
Yeah, that's great. One thing you mentioned about follow-up after an interview, I think as fundraisers, we really are professional thank you writers, thank you note writers. So I think it still amazes me that people don't write thank you notes. I would hope that us as fundraisers, we know how important that thank you is. So, but that's a good reminder. So when we're thinking about our personal brand, so how we are positioning ourselves in the workforce and in our careers, how can we build our personal brands that really position us for success in our fundraising careers?
Sure. So I think that does actually build upon the previous question. So making sure that you are approaching your different conversations and who you're meeting with consistency and kindness, and having that go a long way, and being genuine, making sure, as you know, in philanthropy, you're remembering the details about an individual, getting to know them too personally, not necessarily prodding, but showing interest in another person, and making sure that when you're speaking to someone, you're really finding out about them. So an interview, for example, it's not about you. It's about what do they need and how can I fulfill that. So that's the same way that you want to approach the way that you interact with people, not to the point where you'll burn yourself out and you have to manage yourself still and make sure that doesn't happen. But when you're interacting, you have to get a feel for what this person's looking for, how that aligns with what you're doing, and in what way can we both mutually benefit from this, whether it is just purely friendship or if it is something longer term. And you never know who you'll speak with now and how it can impact you in the future. For example, our business, it's very much driven by relationships and clients and word of mouth too. So today's candidate could be tomorrow's client. And it's the same way too in philanthropy when it comes to prospects and donors and moving people through your pipeline too. So that's one thing you really want to take into consideration. Another thing is making sure that you're out there in the community, as you discussed. That's a very important part. Going to different events, being strategic in how you spend your time too. Also, it can feel you could easily slip into only seeing people that you know at events and just meeting with them. Try your best to, of course, go back to those but meet some new faces every time too, and build your network. And Pearl and I actually met at an EPIP event. We were panelists there together, and we've stayed in contact since, and I think she's just wonderful. So that's so that's an example of how you never know who you'll run into and what it can lead to in the future.
Yeah, I think the nonprofit community, even though, like I said, we make up 10% of the workforce, it's a small world out there. And so I think, to your point, building your personal brand and building those relationships is really important on so many levels. Great. So do we have any questions from the audience that we want to address?
We do. I've been making notes of all the questions. So one of the questions here is, how do you attract talent as an employer?
Good question. So ways that you can attract talent, because this is good for you to keep in mind whether you are actually an employer or an employee at this time, because at some point you can use this hopefully as incentive to help yourself or to attract talent later. So with nonprofit, the pay is not comparable to those of other industries oftentimes. So you have to look for other ways that you can get benefit from it and attract talent. So one way that you can do that is promoting these different professional development groups and organizations and encouraging your employees to go to that. So sponsoring their membership to YNPN or EPIP or other organizations that are a benefit. So that's one part, making sure that you are helping to either go with education or certificates, but providing opportunities for your employees to grow professionally and take that with them over time. Another way to do that too is oftentimes we'll see with development staff in particular, younger folks who might be spending a lot of time in the office doing data entry or staying internally facing. where they could truly benefit from being out in the community and getting to know. So making sure that you're taking your staff members of all levels and areas of experience and having them really connect with the mission, both with the clients and the people you're serving, but also with the people such as your donors, and having them see firsthand the ways that these interactions go and have them take part in it too, because there's a huge benefit of this shadowing and mentoring opportunity. It's not patronizing if done correctly. It's really inspiring and uplifting. And if you go into a job looking for growth and trying to grow yourself with that growth mindset, you'll get a lot of benefit from it. So those are some ways that you can attract talent, which is to encourage professional development. You can also provide different opportunities that wouldn't otherwise be there, education. And then also, if you're able to do things like, PTO or flexible time or other benefits there, and making sure that those, their value is actually put forward, and so that people can really understand that will help too to attract more talent.
It's a great point about professional development, mentorship, really making sure that you're bringing in the right people and keeping them and helping them to grow. Another question here is about resumes and the application process. When you're looking at resumes, no matter the level, maybe it changes depending on the type of position, what are the first things that you look for?
Okay, so if I'll imagine a resume right in front here. First of all, trying to see if it's logical, in logical order. That might seem like a very basic thing, but sometimes they're not. I want to make sure that things are clearly laid out, that there aren't any huge or apparent errors. Not necessarily if there's a typo or two, will I discard something or will we do that? But we want to make sure that you have a logical train of thought. From there, we'll take a look at the positions, the organization that you're with, the years of experience that you've had, and then we also look for numbers and metrics. Super important to make sure that you have valuable data points. The area, for example, where sometimes people will summarize and say collaborative, team builder, all those different words. It's great, but it doesn't really provide much context as to how you actually did that. So if you're able to back that up with an example and real points of data as to how that's being accomplished, great. So in terms of for fundraising, your budget, that size that you've managed, the size of your portfolio, the size of the largest gift you've had, the number of direct reports you've had, all those different points, and also how you've grown over time too. So if someone's with an organization, I want to see that they're growing forward with it. So taking on additional responsibilities, how that changed over time. Also their movement between organizations. Was it logical? Can you see a progression with that? And then of course we understand there's a lot of movement, especially in development too oftentimes, but someone who has still logical reasons for that movement too, and that we can follow that should there be further discussion.
Great, thank you. We have a number of other questions. It seems that a lot of these could actually be posed to both of you. So I'm just gonna jump right into it. I have my sheet here. We've been furiously writing them all down. Going back to the board question, how do you simply approach someone at the organization to ask to join a board? And how do you make that ask?
That's interesting. That's a great question. So there's a couple of different ways. So sometimes the organization might be advertising that they need board members. But oftentimes, if you're wanting to join a board and you're not really sure, how to approach the organization, certainly find out, who the contact is, find a staff person that you would feel comfortable talking to. A lot of times, too, you could, instead of saying, I just want to be on your board and sort of jumping into that, you can maybe say, is there anything that I can help you with? Is there a committee that you guys are building that might give me a little peek into what board service might be with your organization? But I think it's exciting. I know if you've ever been in a position where someone comes to you and says, I would love to be on your board, know that they are flattered. They're excited. So nonprofits are always looking to grow their board. So don't be intimidated by just asking whoever, a staff person is. It doesn't necessarily have to be the executive director. It could be the development director. It could be just whoever staff person that you sort of are connected to. Don't be afraid to do that, because they're going to be thrilled that someone's interested in them and that they don't have to go hunting for board members, because that happens a lot. So I would say, just be confident. And again, if you want to start a little bit smaller, ask about a committee that you might be able to be a part of before you jump into the board service piece of it. But I think just know that they are going to be thrilled that someone's interested regardless.
Great, thank you. I see a question that just popped in that is really relevant to both of you, so I'm just going to read it. If you're at a really small organization, i.e. you're the only staff member and you're responsible for all areas of the organization, and the budget's really small, how do you make that experience stand out on your resume? It's a great question.
So I'll start here. So we actually see this quite oftentimes where we'll have someone who does come from a smaller nonprofit wanting to enter into a larger one. And sometimes we'll see back and forth movement of those who might start in a smaller organization, move to a larger, then move back to a smaller as they move up in terms of responsibilities and size of what they've taken on. So in terms of what you can do, I think that the fact that you've run a whole nonprofit on your own really does speak to how many skills you have available. So make sure that when you are applying, though, for a position, however, that you tailor it to that. So if there is a lot of experience that really isn't relevant, don't put that at the forefront of it. Make sure that you're really emphasizing and highlighting what you have done, and then in conjunction show how your time has otherwise been spent too. So you want to highlight the important parts, but also not completely ignore the size of what you've done too. Also, for smaller nonprofits too, you can show in terms of percentage the growth of what you've done. So if you've come into one, maybe it started really small, 100, 200,000, and you've grown it to 350. That's a fairly good percent increase that you want to focus on right there and have highlighted versus necessarily the numbers. So focusing on increase in percentage is one that you can do too.
That's a great point. Jess, do you have any other tips?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when you're the only staff member, you have to remember that you are incredibly talented to be doing all the things that you're doing. And don't be afraid to play that up, that you are wearing several hats at your organization. But I think especially what Liliane said is tailor your experience certainly to the position that you're trying to get. So just, kind of reiterating it, highlight the things, the parts of your job that most closely align with the one you're trying to apply for. I think that's great. But like I said, I think remember that I think there is a talent to being the only staff member and wearing all those hats. So that can definitely be a benefit and not a detriment.
One other thing I thought of too is that you can show that you have experience with larger ones too by having that volunteer committee board work be with larger organizations. So show that you have an understanding of how a more maybe sophisticated or larger machine works too. So that way you can pair both together, showing, look, I know how to do it all myself, and I also know how to function within a larger entity.
It's a great point where you can tie in your volunteer work into your skill set.
Yes.
Okay, we have so many questions coming in, so just going to read straight from here. This is a great question. If I'm already burnt out, how do I backtrack out of this cycle?
Go take a nap.
What'd you say?
Go take a nap. That's a great question. So I think if you are already burnt out, so the slide where we were talking about, learning to say no, making time for reflection, those are things that can not only prevent burnout, but can also help relieve burnout. So maybe you just need to take a little bit of time away from the office, even though I know that you're probably shaking your head saying, no, I can't do that. It's, too busy. You just have to make that time. Make some time to reflect, to reconnect with your mission. I would suggest, especially if you're burnout, to make that time out of the office time. Whether that's, for me, for example, going to Shenandoah National Park where I have no cell phone service is a great way when I'm feeling really burnt out to just sort of get away from things. So that's what I would recommend. I mean, I think you have to take steps to sort of refresh yourself and get your enthusiasm back and find that passion again when you're really burnt out. And a lot of times you really do. You just need to take time. And it could be a day, it could be a week. It depends on what your situation is and what you're allowed to do. But really make sure that you're taking that time for you.
Definitely. I also think that you have to figure out where you're at. So just knowing you've reached burnout is not enough to really make a decision on how you want to proceed ahead. So for example, if this is a completely new position, maybe you need to give it a little bit more time or make your, what you're feeling known to your team, communicate it, not in a way that's, putting it down, but one where you can lead to constructive, work coming through this. So that's something you might want to do. If you have to address the problem too and be clear and upfront with those that you're working with, what is going on, how you're feeling, and also ways that you can see it being remedied too. If you just come saying, here's the problem, you have to come up with a solution too. It's not going to help just coming, doing that, or at least say that you're open to new ones too. If you have been in this position, you have already addressed this and you are just not getting that relief and you've tried to balance out your life and whatnot, maybe it's not the right environment for you and you should consider other opportunities in pursuing that. First of all, figuring out if you're with nonprofit, do you want to stay with nonprofit, and making sure that you're going to continue forward with that. If you're earlier on in your career, it'll be a little easier to pivot than if you're farther along. But still, coming to that realization, is this what I really want to do? Because you have to be passionate about it. And then the second part is, if you're wanting to look for a new position, making sure that you're doing it at a time that is respectful for the organization, but also for yourself. Sometimes we'll see people who just leave, and it's really a competitive landscape. It's difficult to find a job, and we'll post a position, we'll get hundreds of applicants. There's only going to be one person in the end who will get that. So understanding how competitive this landscape is makes you realize you need to put your feelers out there earlier on in a way that's still mindful, and respectful of your current organization, but one that if you have to, you can move forward, and also know that your personal connections and the network that you built will help set you aside or apart as a candidate versus just being one who's pressing easy apply on all the applications.
Yeah, great points. We have so many questions coming in, and unfortunately not enough time to get to all of them. So we're going to do one more quick question, and then we're actually going to provide their contact information to you so that you can reach out to the presenters directly or via social media to get all of your questions answered. So this last question here, what are suggestions with finding commonalities with leadership so you can successfully build your organization's culture together? To provide some context, some of us work in an organization where we're the only employee with a nonprofit background. Sometimes this leads to leadership not fully understanding the depth of our work. So how can you build your culture together within that context?
I think the first thing would be to listen and to ask questions and try to find out where they're coming from and not to judge. Because you're right, oftentimes nonprofit people are not given the credit that they deserve, and sometimes there'll be people who come in to the organization without that background and don't fully appreciate the depth of what you're doing too. But before trying to impart that, taking a little bit of a softer approach in terms of figuring out, okay, where is this person coming from? What are their interests? What do they like to do? What are they concerned about with work? What's keeping them up at night? Where are they seeing issues? Finding that and then showing ways that you're either able to meet that in further conversation or in follow-ups where you're expressing interest in that, building that trust over time, and then also providing solutions with your nonprofit background, making reference to how you learned this or how you've had experience with this beforehand and you'd like to take it on. That's a great way for you to also increase the scope of what you're doing, is finding out what really needs to be done and then finding solutions with it and making reference to your nonprofit background and showing these best practices that maybe these people do not know at this time.
Jess, do you have any last minute thoughts on that question before we move forward?
Yeah, I have a quick thought, and it kind of, reiterating what Liliane said is, is building a culture is a two-way street. So you have to remember that. I think it's easy to come into a situation like that, especially if you feel like you're not being valued for your experience in the nonprofit world, and be defensive, whether you realize you're being defensive or not. So just remember that to build that culture, you have to really listen, you have to keep communication open and be willing to take their input. But I also think one of the things that is a growing trend, and if not in your area, I think I'd like to remind people, especially people in the business world, that the word nonprofit is your organization's tax status. It's not your business model. So you do know how to run a business. You do have a business background, even though your business is a nonprofit. So sometimes just reminding people that your business experience is just as valuable as theirs.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'd like to continue the conversation. You'll see on the screen right now, this is how you can ask all of your remaining questions. Tag us, use the hashtag SIP webinar, and then on our next slide, we'll have the presenter's contact information. And you're going to receive this in an email in the coming days. So you'll have all this information so you can reach out to the presenters. Thank you so much, Jess and Liliane. We really appreciate all of your insight and expertise. And thank you everyone who attended. We want to be sure you don't miss our next webinar, Wednesday, August 18th, Telling a Good Story, Changing Hearts, Minds, and Action. This is all about storytelling. And there's a little surprise if you come participate live in this next webinar, which you'll find out soon. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
And please don't forget to take our survey.